At 3 a.m. on December 18, 1944, in Belgium, a 19-year-old Iowa private used a knife to remove his boot. He did this to his own foot, not by choice, but because the leather had frozen solid to his skin. Should the medic fail to remove it within 10 minutes, the young soldier would completely lose his foot. The medic severed the laces, pulling skin as the boot was torn off. The private remained silent. The extreme cold numbed him to the pain. His toes were blackened. 3 had already been lost. Just 5 miles distant, in a French chateau featuring silk sheets and warm fireplaces, 12 American officers enjoyed wine and laughter over a recent joke. Remember to like, subscribe, and enable notifications to catch our future videos. Explore more historical events, inspiring moments, and stories from the past with us. Join our community as the most compelling narratives are still ahead. This recounts the night General George S. Patton entered a forbidden door, witnessed something enraging, and, within a minute, took an action unforgettable to every Third Army officer. This narrative details how Patton challenged the officer corps, beginning with Europe's harshest winter in 3 decades. Hitler's desperate final gamble, the Battle of the Bulge, had just commenced and was succeeding. On December 16, 1944, German forces, comprising 250,000 men and over 600 tanks, breached the Ardennes forest, striking the Allied line's weakest point with full force. The Allied front didn't yield, it broke. American units faced encirclement, isolation, and overrunning. Whole battalions lost radio contact. Adverse weather entirely grounded Allied air support. Without air cover, support, or aerial reconnaissance, German armor advanced westward with unexpected speed. Supreme headquarters neared panic. However, for American infantrymen in Belgium that December, the Germans weren't their primary threat. The cold itself was the enemy. Temperatures plummeted to 10 degrees Fahrenheit or below. Winds, like hateful blades, pierced all layers of clothing. The ground, frozen solid and iron-hard, rendered digging defensive positions almost impossible. Troops resided in holes laboriously carved from resistant earth, shielding themselves with pine branches, canvas, or anything to briefly lessen the wind. Fires were forbidden. Smoke would betray their positions. Smoke signaled German artillery observers, equipped with binoculars and radios. A fire meant certain death within 4 minutes. Thus they remained in darkness, on the frozen ground, waiting. Frostbite ravaged units like an additional adversary, overwhelming Army medics. One soldier awoke at 2 a.m. Upon checking his feet, I found no sensation, no pain, nothing, which was more alarming than pain itself, as pain indicated living tissue. Medics performed field amputations of toes and fingers. Soldiers lost hands. Official reports ultimately recorded over 15,000 non-combat casualties from cold injuries during the Battle of the Bulge. These men, untouched by bullets or mines, returned home incomplete, having endured prolonged exposure in frozen Belgian holes with no available remedy. This was brutal winter combat. Enduring was the only choice. Surrender meant a German POW camp in the coldest winter on record. So, you stayed put. Sea rations were eaten cold. Fire meant death. Feet were wrapped, hoping circulation would last until dawn. All men suffered and froze. Every Third Army soldier endured this harsh reality nightly in the cold, dark Ardennes. As General Patton knew, he never observed war remotely. At 59 in December 1944, most generals managed battles from distant, comfortable command posts, reviewing maps and reports. Patton did not. Patton constantly drove to the front unannounced. His staff resented this, as it forced them to keep pace. Keeping up with him was a constant, terrifying ordeal. He believed commanders who didn't personally see the ground operated blindly, as reports were filtered, softened, and sanitized by the time they reached headquarters. The only way to truly know what was happening was to personally observe it. He learned this philosophy the hard way. Patton had studied war since before most of his current subordinates were born. He competed in the 1912 Olympics modern pentathlon and designed the U.S. Army's Model 1913 cavalry saber, a weapon bearing his name. He served under Pershing in the 1916 punitive expedition against Pancho Villa and again in World War I, where he helped establish the American Tank Corps from scratch. He was shot in the leg at the Battle of the Argonne, standing exposed, under machine gun fire, directing tanks on foot, refusing cover. In 1944, he still did the same, standing exposed, observing, refusing comfort. His men feared and followed him with near religious ferocity. Not due to kindness, he wasn't kind. Not because he was warm, he was cold. They followed him because he was always present, seen at the front, standing tall amidst artillery, visiting aid stations, and driving fire-swept roads to personally assess. They followed him because a man who voluntarily shared their danger, even unnecessarily, issued orders that differed from a safe, distant officer's. Patton grasped something that December, forgotten by the chateau officers. His soldiers would give their all, even their lives, but only if they believed he understood their sacrifices and acknowledged their suffering. On December 18th, Patton conducted an unannounced inspection. His jeep traversed the dark Belgian countryside, visiting forward positions, ensuring commanders were in place, and verifying Third Army's defense against the Eastern German offensive. It was late, past midnight, and freezing. The road was barely visible via the jeep's blackout headlights, designed to hide convoys from German aircraft. The driver mistakenly turned onto an unmapped country road, veering from the main route through bare winter trees. They were about to reverse when Patton saw something through the windshield, leaning forward, silent for 3 seconds. Smoke from multiple active chimneys producing steady gray columns into the winter sky. In a combat zone where fire meant death, Patton told the driver to proceed. Rounding a bend, a magnificent 3-story 18th-century stone chateau, an aristocratic estate, appeared. Having impassively observed revolutions, emperors, and 2 world wars, warm, golden light filled every window, and scratchy American jazz, a lively civilian tune, drifted from within, utterly incongruous for a December 1944 war zone. No military vehicles, sentries, or blackout curtains were present. This brightly lit, warm palace sat in the Belgian countryside, only 5 miles from men dying in trenches and sounds of people free from suffering. Patton left his jeep, walked to the unlocked front door, pushed it open, and stepped inside. He was first struck by the warmth, radiating from multiple fireplaces deep inside, a heat he hadn't felt in weeks. The entrance hall gleamed with marble and crystal. An overhead chandelier and a sweeping staircase led upstairs. Hearing voices and laughter, he followed the sound to the open dining room. Patton paused in the doorway, surveying the interior. For a brief instant, his face displayed something deeper than anger, colder and older than anger. It was the look of a man whose fears were confirmed. 12 officers. His American Third Army officers sat at a long dining table set with china, silver, and crystal glasses half filled with red wine. They ate a lavish meal: roasted meat, fresh bread, vegetables, hot, real food. Enough for 50 enlisted men, not from a C-ration tin. Clean, pressed uniforms and fresh shaves. One smoked a cigar. Another, pouring wine, looked up to Spock Patton in the doorway. The room instantly fell silent, as if a wire was cut. Forks froze, glasses hung motionless. The man with the wine bottle kept pouring for an extra involuntary second until his brain processed what his eyes saw and his hand froze. Wine overflowed the glass onto the white tablecloth. No one moved to stop it. Patton said nothing, slowly entering the room. He observed the crackling fireplace and the 4 mostly empty wine bottles on the sideboard. He eyed the table's impossible abundance of food, contrasting it with his soldiers' meager meals in frozen foxholes. He walked to a plate, picked up a piece of bread, turned it over, and put it back. The senior colonel rose, searching for an explanation. "General Patton, sir. We didn't expect you. This is a temporary coordination headquarters." Patton raised a hand, instantly silencing the colonel as if cutting his vocal cords. "Where are your men?" he asked, a geographical query. The colonel blinked. "Sir, your soldiers, where are they sleeping tonight?" "They're in the field, sir, in forward defensive positions." "In foxholes, yes, sir, in foxholes. At 12 degrees, without heat or shelter." Patton slowly scanned each face around the table. "2 hours ago, in your sector, I saw your men. A 19-year-old Iowa private had his boot cut off. His foot skin came off with the leather. He'll limp for life. He sat in a hole you ordered dug." Silence filled the room, save for the fire. "Your men know you're here." Patton said, "Enlisted men always know where officers sleep. They know about this building, your heat, hot food, and wine, while they eat frozen rations and lose toes to cold. They talk, and obeying your orders means choosing to follow someone they have no reason to respect." The colonel spoke again. He spoke of officer duties, rest, and command effectiveness. Patton's voice dropped, worse than shouting. 10 minutes! Get your combat pack, not luggage. What a soldier carries. Leave this building. March to the front line. Find your units. Dig a foxhole next to your men. Stay there until I personally relieve you." A major mentioned it was 3 a.m., a 5-mile march in sub-zero. "Your men did it yesterday." Patton said, "In combat boots, carrying 60 pounds of gear after 40 miles, you'll manage." He checked his watch. 9 minutes. Chaos erupted. Officers scrambled for coats, boots, chairs. Their comfortable authority dissolved in 90 seconds of panic. The jazz record played on. No one stopped it. Patton wasn't finished. "Colonel," the senior officer stopped, turned back. "Tomorrow morning, this building becomes a field hospital. Medical trucks arrive at dawn. Your dining room will be an operating theater. Bedrooms, recovery wards. Men losing fingers and toes to frostbite in your sector will recover in your beds." The colonel nodded. "If I find you over 100 yards from your men again, you'll spend the war commanding a Liverpool supply depot. Clear?" "Yes, sir. Crystal clear, sir." Within 10 minutes, the chateau was empty. 12 men walked into the Belgian winter night, hit by extreme cold. They began the 5-mile march back to the front, toward their foxholes and men. Patton stayed, inspecting every room. He found more evidence: portable bathtubs, record players, personal food stores, restaurant-level wine, and a week's food for a rifle company. All gathered while frontline men ate whatever frozen supply lines delivered. Before leaving, he wrote a message, sent to every 3rd Army Battalion commander. "Before dawn, any officer living comfortably while his men suffer will be relieved. Rank is a burden, not a privilege. If you can't bear that burden, I'll find someone who can." By morning, the message spread throughout the 3rd Army. Overnight, the Army's culture quietly shifted, without announcement or order. Officers appeared at the front, not for inspections, but to stay, dig, eat, and sleep in the same frozen conditions as their men, and wake up with the same cold. Unexpectedly, men fought harder, not because conditions improved. The cold ignored Patton's orders. Men still lost toes. Supply lines were stretched, and German armor advanced. Yet soldiers, seeing officers sleep beside them, followed orders with a unique trust, even in the war's harshest winter. Patton and his men in December 1944 couldn't foresee the true test approaching. The chateau was just the beginning. Part 2 reveals how Patton's leadership faced the Third Army's gravest crisis: a besieged city, the 101st Airborne surrounded, and ammunition scarce. A German general demanded surrender. Patton's two-word reply became history's most defiant battlefield statement. In Part 1, Patton found 12 senior officers dining luxuriously while their men froze. He gave them 10 minutes to return to the front. Patton made the chateau a hospital and told commanders, "Rank is a burden, not a privilege." Officers obeyed, culture changed, and men fought harder. History rarely mentions the chateau event wasn't the story's end. This triggered a larger conflict, setting Patton against the military bureaucracy. He made a decision his superiors called reckless, peers impossible, but history would deem a great act of leadership. 3 days after the chateau, Bastogne became a catastrophe. Patton had 48 hours. The 101st Airborne was completely surrounded. 7 German divisions encircled Bastogne, a vital Ardennes road junction. Its converging highways made it the Battle of the Bulge's most strategic point. Both sides knew controlling Bastogne meant controlling regional movement. 45,000 Germans encircled 18,000 Americans, who were low on ammo, food, and time. 6 days of grounded air supply meant the 101st ate 1 meal daily. Medical supplies were scarce. Surgeons operated without anesthesia. Artillery rationed shells to 10 per gun daily, compared to 200 in normal heavy fighting. At 4 degrees Fahrenheit, men died in Bastogne from treatable wounds due to poor medical care. General von Luttwitz, the German commander, demanded surrender. The demand went to General McAuliffe, who replied, "Nuts." It was right, but a death sentence unless the encirclement was broken in 72 hours. Patton had already decided. On December 19th, Eisenhower asked commanders how long to turn the Third Army north for Bastogne relief. Patton's staff estimated 3 days minimum. Other generals found that answer optimistically insane. Pivoting a 250,000-man army with all its gear takes weeks, not 3 days, especially not in winter. You don't do it under German attack. "When can you move?" Eisenhower asked. "This morning," Patton stated. The room fell silent. Then someone chuckled, not disrespectfully, but at an unbelievable claim. "George," Eisenhower said carefully, "you can't move a corps in 48 hours. I ordered the movement this morning before coming here. The 4th Armored is already turning north," Patton said. The following silence was distinct. This silence meant men reevaluated possibilities. Not everyone was convinced. Lieutenant General Leslie McNair, representing Army Group Command, leaned forward. His career relied on institutional process and military doctrine. Doctrine, developed over decades of study, existed for good reasons. General Patton stated a relief column, unprepared, without air or artillery support, moving through this terrain in this weather against 7 German divisions would be destroyed before reaching the perimeter. You'd lose armor and men. You'll still lose Bastogne. The 101st is losing men now. Patton said, "They're losing them for nothing. My men will lose them making progress." You're suggesting a corps sacrifice with 48 hours prep. I'm suggesting it with 3 years prep. My men can fight. My officers can lead. I personally confirmed this last week. He paused. The question isn't if we can, but if we dare. McNair's face hardened. "If this fails, General, I'll recommend your relief." Patton stared 3 seconds. "Then watch carefully," he said. "It won't fail." Privately, driving back that night, Patton knew the math was terrifying. General Hugh Gaffey's 4th Armored would lead the relief. They'd fight through frozen, mined, and pre-targeted roads, attacking 7 divisions' flank. Night movement would avoid Luftwaffe ground attacks. They'd do this with stretched supply lines and no fuel error margin. The real story begins here, as Patton's plan required something unprecedented at this scale, which his logistics officers called operationally unprecedented. Manuals deemed it impossible. In under 2 weeks, he needed to reorient the Third Army's entire supply network 90 degrees north in 48 hours. All fuel, ammo, medical, food, and repair facilities, previously facing east towards the German border where the Third Army fought, now had to point north simultaneously. As the army moved, the enemy watched, and the weather killed men, vehicles, radios, and engines. At 11 p.m., Patton called Major General Hobart Gay. "Tell me what we cannot do," Patton said. Gay read the list. The list was long. 4th Armored's fuel was 60 miles off. Artillery ammo for the relief corridor was in 3 separate, misplaced depots. The northern road network from Third Army's positions had 2 choke points pre-registered by German artillery. Daylight convoys there would be destroyed. "All right," Patton said. "Now, who do we need?" The next 72 hours, Patton's logistics officers' most intense period, involved fuel trucks driving lightless at night, using maps and memory to reposition supplies for the new advance. Artillery ammunition moved by military trucks, requisitioned Belgian vehicles, horse-drawn wagons, and a narrow-gauge railway. A Third Army sergeant found and reactivated the abandoned railway in 4 hours. The choke points were critical. 2 road junctions visible to German observers, pre-sighted for artillery, capable of stopping daylight movement. Moving convoys through them in darkness meant navigating icy, snowy roads in blackout, at speeds making every curve a disaster. Patton's simple, genius solution: clear both choke points simultaneously. At 3 a.m. on December 22nd, using 2 minutes of artillery suppression while convoys pushed through at maximum speed. Drivers had one chance. If a vehicle broke down in the choke point, it was pushed off and the column kept moving. No stops, recoveries, or hesitation. The operation lasted 11 minutes. 47 vehicles passed the first choke point. 39 the second. German artillery responded 6 seconds too late. Suppression kept observers down, just long enough. 3 vehicles were destroyed. The rest got through. By dawn on December 22nd, the 4th Armored had 72 hours of combat fuel and enough artillery for a sustained assault. Though imperfect, the supply line and operation were functional, which was all Patton required. McNair, upon reviewing the morning's logistics report, fell silent. He remarked to his aide, "He actually did it." The aide confirmed, "Yes, sir, resupply in 46 hours." McNair then put the report aside. He remained silent. On December 22nd, the 4th Armored advanced north towards Bastogne. For 4 brutal days, they fought through frozen terrain against entrenched, determined German forces, who knew a breakthrough would reverse the Ardennes' strategic situation. German resistance was fierce. The 4th Armored suffered heavy losses. At times, the advance halted, prompting junior commanders to request new directives via radio. Patton's consistent reply was a simple, "Keep moving forward." By 4:45 p.m. on December 26th, Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams' 37th Tank Battalion, part of the 4th Armored Division, broke the German encirclement south of Bastogne. The initial vehicles entering Bastogne were met by 101st Airborne soldiers, who had endured a week on minimal rations, operated without anesthesia, famously defied a German general, and held their ground for 8 days through sheer will and ammunition conservation. The corridor, only a quarter-mile wide at its narrowest, remained open despite immediate German attempts to close it. Official post-action reports revealed the Third Army had reoriented 250,000 troops and their full logistical support. This 90-degree shift in 48 hours defied Army doctrine, which stipulated a minimum of 14 days. The relief column advanced 60 miles through 7 German divisions in 4 days, inflicting over 25,000 enemy casualties along the corridor. The Battle of the Bulge, initially appearing catastrophic for the Allies within 72 hours, had reached a turning point. McNerney made no recommendation for Patton's removal, nor did he publicly discuss the Supreme Headquarters exchange. However, a staff officer later noted in a private diary that McNair, driving from the front, had once remarked, "I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've never seen anything like it." Yet, Supreme Headquarters remained unaware of a crucial detail. What after-action reports failed to document was that, amidst the chaotic Bastogne relief, as 250,000 men moved across frozen Belgian roads, a small, seemingly minor administrative error had occurred. 3 officers Patton expelled from the chateau on December 18th never rejoined their units. They went elsewhere, taking items removed from the chateau before Patton's inventory team arrived, which would soon cause a problem unrelated to German armor or frozen supply routes. This issue would reach Washington, providing those seeking Patton's removal with potent leverage. In Part 1, Patton discovered 12 officers living lavishly in a French chateau while their troops froze nearby. He expelled them into the cold night, converting the chateau into a field hospital. In Part 2, he achieved what the Allied High Command deemed impossible, pivoting the Third Army 90 degrees north in 46 hours, breaking through 7 German divisions to relieve the besieged 101st Airborne at Bastogne. McNair made no relief recommendation. The corridor remained open, and the Battle of the Bulge turned. However, 3 officers Patton expelled from the chateau never reported to their units. They went elsewhere, and what they took from the building before Patton's inventory team arrived had just reached Washington as a formal complaint to the U.S. Army Inspector General. The complaint, bearing 17 signatures, alleged abuse of command authority and unbecoming conduct. This transcended a Belgian chateau. It concerned whether George Patton would conclude the war commanding the Third Army or await a court of inquiry in England. Patton's Washington adversaries had long anticipated this. The thick file reaching the Army Inspector General's desk in late December 1944 detailed both the Chateau incident and Patton's infamous 1943 Sicily soldier-slapping incident. He had already faced reprimand and near dismissal for it. The report cited his unauthorized advance past operational limits during the Normandy breakout, portraying a commander who disregarded rules and superiors. The complaint was coordinated. Significant effort went into it by someone with official access and rank to secure 17 signatures on such a bold document. Patton's staff discovered the complaint on December 28th, 2 days post-Bastogne corridor opening, when Colonel Charles Codman delivered the intelligence report at 6 a.m. Patton read it, put it down, and sipped his coffee. "How many signatories do you know?" he inquired. Codman had researched them. 11 signatories hadn't served within 50 miles of the front. 4 were linked to officers Patton had dismissed for incompetence. 2 worked for a general who publicly opposed Patton's strategy in October. "It's entirely political," Patton concluded. "Good, sir." He rose, stating, "Political issues have political remedies. What's the corridor status?" The corridor was his sole concern. While Washington produced paperwork, Germans mobilized armor. The German High Command quickly absorbed the shock of the Bastogne relief with the efficiency of a battle-hardened force. Within 48 hours of the corridor opening, German intelligence provided a detailed analysis. detailing Patton's 46-hour supply network reorientation. This analysis went straight to Field Marshal Walter Model, commander of Army Group B. Model read it, then immediately convened an emergency staff meeting. He moved a corps in 2 days. Model informed his staff, against doctrine, against the weather, against our defenses, he succeeded. He paused. This means our entire western flank defensive model is flawed. We planned for the army we anticipated, not the one present. German casualty reports from the Bastogne relief corridor quantified the situation. Over 4 days, opposing the 4th Armored's northern advance, German forces lost over 400 armored vehicles, 25,000 men killed, wounded, or captured, and 3 divisional commanders dead or dismissed. The offensive momentum that shocked Allied command on December 16th had vanished. The German army in the Ardennes was now on the defensive. This was Patton's desired outcome. However, Model's analysis revealed something alarming. Not just casualties, but the rapid American logistics shift. If Patton could reorient his supply network 90 degrees in 46 hours, he could repeat it. He could appear anywhere. He wasn't constrained by standard operational timelines. He was effectively unpredictable, beyond any German defensive planning. Model ordered new directives. German forces in the Ardennes would systematically destroy road infrastructure before any Third Army advance. This included bridges, culverts, rail junctions, every logistical choke point Patton relied on. Unable to predict his strike point, they aimed to eliminate his rapid strike capability. By January 3rd, German engineers had destroyed 14 bridges on the Third Army's possible advance routes. It was a logical response. Yet, as Patton instantly realized from the reports, it was precisely the reaction he sought. "They're reacting to us," he told his staff. "A reacting army isn't attacking." Model reassigned his top engineers from offense to demolition. That's not a winning general. However, the bridge demolitions posed a real issue, an engineering challenge, not a political one. Winter engineering issues, under attack and with few supplies, often turned disastrous. By January 9, 1945, the 5th Infantry Division reached the river after 3 days of fierce combat through the Siegfried Line's outer defenses. Luxembourg's Sauer River, 50 meters wide, flowed swiftly with snowmelt, its water near freezing. The crucial bridge at Echternach, vital for the division's progress, had been destroyed. German engineers had demolished it 48 hours prior, scattering steel spans 40 meters downstream. Patton required this crossing. His entire eastern offensive to breach the Siegfried Line and enter Germany hinged on moving armor over the Sauer. At Echternach, this task needed completion within 24 hours. Each delay allowed German forces to strengthen eastern bank defenses and gave engineers more time to set up further demolitions. Engineers estimated an 18-hour construction time for a Bailey Bridge under ideal conditions. Conditions were adverse. German artillery overlooked the crossing. Air temperature was 6 degrees Fahrenheit, and the strong river current made typical bridging perilous. The eastern bank was defended by veteran elements of the 276th Volksgrenadier Division, who had fought there for months. They were familiar with every firing angle from all defensive posts. Patton personally visited the crossing site. He stood silently on the western bank for 2 minutes, observing the river and far bank, then addressed his chief engineer, Brigadier General Conklin. "What's needed?" Patton inquired. "Time, sir, and for them to cease firing," was the reply. "I can provide one." The plan Patton sanctioned within 30 minutes was, by all normal measures, reckless. 2 infantry battalions would cross the Sauer by night in assault boats, securing an eastern bank bridgehead. They would hold it against the 276th Volksgrenadier until engineers completed the Bailey Bridge. No prior artillery would be used. to avoid alerting Germans and allowing them to mass reserves. Infantry would cross silently in darkness into a defended position on a near-freezing river. They carried only weapons, knowing a capsized boat meant 4 minutes until hypothermia rendered them useless. At 0200 on January 10, 1945, 18 assault boats simultaneously launched across a 300-meter front, without artillery or lights. Paddling strenuously against the current, men maintained formation by sound, hearing comrades breathe in the dark. German sentries detected them midway. Flares ignited, machine guns fired. 3 boats were hit, 1 overturned. Equipment and current dragged the men underwater before rescue was possible. The remaining 15 boats successfully reached the eastern bank. 40 minutes of dark, close-quarters combat along the riverbank ensued, an experience survivors never fully recounted. The 276th Volksgrenadier occupied entrenched positions. Americans, having crossed a freezing river at 2 a.m. without artillery, fought on unfamiliar terrain. Logically, they should have been annihilated. Yet they held, then advanced 60, 100, then 200 meters. The Volksgrenadier unit on the bank retreated to secondary positions. In that opening, engineers began constructing the Bailey Bridge. This involved building on a river, under fire, at night, in 6 degrees Fahrenheit, by men awake for 19 hours. Each 10-foot, 600-pound panel was hand-assembled and rolled over the water, connecting to the prior section. The entire structure withstood the downstream current. German artillery located a crossing at 0400, initiating a systematic bombardment. 3 engineers died in the initial salvo, but the rest continued their work. At 11:47 on January 10, 1945, the first American tank traversed the Sauer River at Eckernhof. The 276th Volksgrenadier Division had defended that area since October. Their commander, a war survivor and later regimental historian, summarized January 10th. "We saw tanks cross the bridge and knew we'd lost the position. We held the river 91 days. Americans crossed in 9 hours. We couldn't comprehend it. Within 72 hours, the Eckernford breach expanded, causing the entire 40-kilometer German defensive line to crumble. 11 Volksgrenadier battalions, previously secured by adjacent positions, suddenly faced exposed flanks. To avoid encirclement, they were forced into a swift retreat. The Third Army advanced 30 kilometers in 3 days, seizing over 8,000 prisoners and destroying irreplaceable German equipment. General Model received the report on January 13th, read it, then messaged Berlin. He reported Army Group B's Luxembourg defensive line was broken and couldn't be restored with available forces. The Battle of the Bulge was effectively over. Patton never visited the Echternach crossing after the bridge's completion. He was already planning the next operation, the Rhine Drive and Crossing, which would place American armor in Germany for the first time. Men who crossed the Sauer on January 10th in the dark received citations weeks, sometimes months, later. Some were already dead, killed fighting east of the river in Germany during the war's final grinding months. Third Army's December 1944, January 1945 statistics revealed a story no single event could fully convey. Over 100,000 German soldiers were killed, wounded, or captured, and more than 500 armored vehicles destroyed. The army that launched Germany's most dangerous 1940 offensive was now in fighting retreat towards its borders. Third Army's Allied casualties were about 40% lower than comparable front operations. Analysts later attributed this directly to Patton's demanded maneuver speed, which his officers, newly motivated by a Belgian winter night and his voice, delivered. Yet, the Inspector General's file remained open in Washington, and the 17 signatures were still unresolved. Almost no one outside the Army's highest levels knew Eisenhower had read the complaint. every page and made a decision. This would determine Patton's fate and the final German campaign's shape. That decision and Patton's reaction is Part 4's story. The man who disciplined officers in a Belgian chateau, moved an army in 46 hours, and broke a 91-day German defensive line by crossing a frozen river in the dark, was about to face his sole remaining enemy. He had never learned to fight the bureaucracy that sought his removal, and this time he couldn't dismiss anyone. Part 1. Patton disciplined 12 officers in a chateau for eating hot meals while their men froze. Part 2. He moved an army 90 degrees north in 46 hours, breaking 7 German divisions to save the 101st Airborne at Bastogne. Part 3. He crossed a frozen river in the dark without artillery, collapsing a 91-day German defensive line and effectively ending the Battle of the Bulge. However, 17 officers had signed a complaint against him. The Inspector General's file was open, and Eisenhower had read it all. This story part is often omitted by history books because Patton's subsequent events don't fit the triumphant general narrative. It's more complex and human, containing a little-known detail that alters all prior meaning. Success sometimes carries an unadvertised cost. Eisenhower decided on the Inspector General's complaint in January 1945. He reviewed the file, the 17 signatures, and detailed allegations regarding the chateau, Sicily slapping, and unauthorized advances. After 3 days' thought, he called his chief of staff. He dictated a 1-paragraph response, dismissing the complaint entirely, without qualification. Eisenhower's direct reasoning was recorded in his diary and later declassified. Third Army's December-January performance was the European campaign's most crucial operational achievement. Baston's relief had saved the Battle of the Bulge. The Sauer River crossing broke the German defensive line. No other Allied commander showed Patton's unique blend of speed, aggression, and logistical creativity. Eisenhower wrote that relieving Patton, based on a complaint from officers he disciplined for dereliction of duty, would be institutional self-destruction. The 17 signatories received no response. Their complaint was filed and ignored. 2 were quietly reassigned to administrative roles before war's end. None ever commanded combat troops again. Patton learned of Eisenhower's decision from Codman on a February 1945 Tuesday morning. Standing before a Rhine map, Codman delivered the news. Patton didn't turn, instead studying the map for 30 seconds, then pointing to an Oppenheim crossing site, stating, "This is where we go over." He never again mentioned the complaint. On March 22, 1945, the Third Army crossed the Rhine at Oppenheim. That night, 12 hours before Montgomery's large, planned northern crossing, Patton called Eisenhower. He told Bradley, "Don't tell anyone, but we're across," then laughed. He then called Eisenhower directly, stating, "I want the world to know the Third Army crossed before Monty." By May 1945, the Third Army had liberated more land and captured more prisoners than any other Allied force in Europe. Their combat operations, from Normandy to Germany's surrender in under a year, resulted in 1.8 million enemy soldiers killed, wounded, or captured. The Third Army liberated 81,500 square miles across France, Belgium, Luxembourg, Germany, Austria, and Czechoslovakia. Notably, their casualty rate per mile advanced was the lowest among comparable Allied forces. The cultural shift, initiated when Patton entered that Belgian chateau, where officers shared their men's hardships, forged a fighting force military historians would study for 80 years. Germany surrendered on May 8, 1945. Patton, aged 59, attended the ceremonies. As one of the world's most renowned soldiers, he had visibly reached the pinnacle of his career. having validated all his mobile warfare theories. He had developed these theories since 1918 and confirmed every leadership instinct, pushing officers and himself to the front lines. Yet he sensed his own impending obsolescence. The post-World War II Army emerging from the conflict's aftermath would not align with Patton's style. Cold War strategy, emphasizing institutional stability, diplomatic calculation, and nuclear deterrence, superseded improvisation. It didn't favor commanders who moved armies in 46 hours or crossed rivers in the dark with minimal planning. Patton's combat strengths, which made him indispensable, also rendered him problematic in peacetime. In October 1945, he received command of the 15th Army. This was not a combat unit, but a historical study group documenting European campaign lessons. It was widely understood as a means to occupy Patton while the new post-war army formed without his direct involvement. On December 9, 1945, while Patton rode in a staff car near Mannheim, Germany, a military truck turned left into their path. The low-speed collision caused no other serious injuries. Patton was thrown forward, hitting his head and fracturing his third and fourth cervical vertebrae, resulting in paralysis from the neck down. He died 12 days later, on December 21, 1945, in a Heidelberg hospital. He had previously survived World War I, North Africa, Sicily, Normandy, the Battle of the Bulge, the Rhine crossing, and 10 months of intense armored combat. Ironically, he died in a car crash on a German road 12 days before Christmas, 7 months after the war ended. He was buried in Luxembourg's American Military Cemetery with his Third Army soldiers. Though his wife desired his burial at West Point, Patton's wish to be interred with his soldiers was honored. However, his story's impact extended far beyond Luxembourg. The leadership principles Patton developed during those harsh Belgian weeks, born from a chateau dining room and a dark river crossing, endured beyond the men who lived them. They spread, were codified, and taught. The idea that rank signifies responsibility, not privilege, and a leader's primary duty is to share their troops' conditions, became a core leadership doctrine at the U.S. Army War College for decades. Third Army officers documented this. Historians documented these principles, and post-war American commanders were trained by those who recalled Patton's actions on December 18, 1944, and their effectiveness in Korea. Research showed that American officers leading from the front consistently achieved superior unit performance in similar combat situations. This documented finding wasn't widely publicized, as it implicitly critiqued the institutional preference for comfortable headquarters, which Patton deemed detrimental. Vietnam's military leadership crisis stemmed from officers' varying commitment to sharing soldiers' conditions, prompting a fundamental reevaluation of officer training and assessment. The 1986 Goldwater-Nichols Act, which reformed U.S. military command for joint operations, explicitly drew on Patton's lessons, prioritizing speed and improvisation over rigid doctrine. The Army's air-land battle doctrine, central to U.S. military strategy through the Cold War and Gulf War, was based on rapid maneuver, a concept Patton demonstrated 40 years earlier. The Battle of the Bulge permanently changed U.S. military thinking on winter warfare, cold weather equipment, and the link between soldiers' physical condition and combat effectiveness. Patton's first-hand view of 15,000 cold weather casualties in December 1944, amputations, frostbite, hypothermia, spurred immediate lasting investment in cold weather gear and medical protocols, saving lives in subsequent cold conflicts. The deepest legacy was human, not tactical or technological, and was documented in a little-known 1962 U.S. Army study on World War II leadership effectiveness. Researchers interviewed over 400 veterans about their best and worst officers. The multi-hundred-page study was classified for nearly 20 years before partial release. Third Army veterans consistently cited one quality above tactical skill, experience, or intelligence as making their officers effective. "They were with us" was a common sentiment, meaning officers shared hardships, in the hole next to us, ate what we ate, didn't ask us to do what he wouldn't. This shared physical presence strongly correlated with unit cohesion and combat effectiveness, surpassing other leadership factors like rank, education, experience, or training. Patton understood this instinctively, without formal study. This instinct drove him to walk to front lines unannounced, drive under fire, and stand exposed during bombardments, believing his men needed to see him. On December 18, 1944, he enforced this instinct, expelling 12 officers into the cold, telling them their men's suffering was theirs, and they couldn't have warmth their soldiers lacked. Few know this detail. The pivotal detail: Lieutenant Colonel James Williamson, a 34-year-old Ohio lawyer commissioned via OCS, was among the officers expelled from the chateau that night. He spent 3 years in administrative roles, getting a field assignment in 1944. He was one of 3 officers who didn't immediately march to the front after Patton's order. Instead, he went to divisional headquarters, filing preliminary paperwork for an inspector general complaint on December 26, 1945, the same day the 4th Armored broke through to Bastogne. Williamson, advancing, was lightly wounded in the shoulder by German artillery, requiring evacuation. He spent 2 weeks in a field hospital. He recovered for 14 days in the chateau near Bastogne, the same building Patton converted into a recovery ward and from which Williamson had been expelled, even in his former bedroom. He never publicly acknowledged the coincidence. However, in a private letter to his wife from the chateau during his recovery, discovered in 2003, he wrote one sentence about it: "I think I finally understand what he was trying to teach us." From a Belgian chateau to the Rhine, from impossible logistics to a dark river crossing, from a feudal 17-signature complaint to a leadership principle that shaped the American military for generations, Patton proved a truth every institution forgets and every effective leader must relearn. Your followers observe everything: your living conditions, your diet, and if you share their hardships or live in comfort. Justifying your comfort by your duties doesn't make you worth following. People constantly assess your leadership. Rank doesn't answer that. Presence does. The Third Army freed vast European territory, but the true victory in winter 1944 was winning soldiers' hearts when they saw officers digging alongside them in frozen foxholes. This immeasurable loyalty was secured in moments within a dining room by a general who entered an unlocked door and faced the reality he discovered. If this story changed your view on leadership, share it. World War II's greatest lessons aren't about weapons or tactics, but human capability when a trusted person suffers with them. Subscribe. 100 more untold stories exist. Rank is a burden, not a privilege. Only leaders who understand this are truly worth following.